I never thought my life would take such a dark turn. My name is Mark, and I used to think I had a perfect family. I had a beautiful wife, Sarah, who I fell in love with the moment I met her at a college party. She had this radiant smile that lit up the room, and her laughter was contagious. We married after a whirlwind romance and welcomed our daughter, Lily, into the world 2 years later. She was our pride and joy, a bright little girl with an infectious spirit and a passion for ballet. Our lives revolved around Lily's dance classes. Every Saturday, we would take her to the local ballet studio, where Ms. Claire, her instructor, would lead the little dancers through their routines. Claire was a striking woman in her early 30s, with long, flowing hair and a grace that seemed to captivate everyone around her. At first, I thought nothing of it. I was just a supportive father, watching my daughter blossom under Claire's guidance. But there was always something about Claire that made me uneasy, a subtle tension that I couldn't quite put my finger on. As the months went by, I noticed that Sarah seemed to spend more time at the studio than necessary. It started with the occasional coffee after class, which I thought was harmless. But as Lily's performances got closer, Sarah's visits became more frequent. I shrugged it off, convincing myself that she was simply being a devoted mother. After all, I trusted Sarah implicitly. She was my partner, my confidant, the woman I had built a life with. But then, a gnawing feeling settled in my gut. I began to notice little things: her late-night phone calls, the way she would smile at her phone, or how she would take longer than usual to respond when I asked her about her day. The doubt crept in slowly, and with it, the fear of losing everything I held dear. One Friday evening, I decided to pick up Lily from her ballet class instead of Sarah. I wanted to surprise them both and maybe take them out for ice cream afterward. As I arrived at the studio, I could see the girls giggling and practicing their pirouettes through the large glass windows. But it was what happened next that changed everything. I caught a glimpse of Sarah and Claire standing too close together, their laughter echoing through the studio. I felt a chill run down my spine. They were whispering, looking at each other with a familiarity that made my blood boil. Something inside me snapped, and I pushed the door open, ready to confront whatever was brewing between them. As I stepped inside, I heard Claire say something that made my heart drop. "You know I can't resist you, Sarah." I froze, the words hanging in the air like a thick fog. My heart raced, and my mind went blank. The reality of the situation crashed down on me like a tidal wave. I couldn't believe what I had just heard. My wife, the mother of my child, was having an affair with our daughter's ballet instructor. I stood there, paralyzed, watching Sarah's face flush with surprise and guilt. Claire's eyes darted toward me, wide with shock. I felt a surge of anger and betrayal, a mix of emotions that left me breathless. How could she do this to us? How could she betray the trust we had built over the years? Before I could process my thoughts, Sarah rushed over to me, her hands trembling as she tried to explain. "Mark, I can explain," but I didn't want to hear it. I turned on my heel and stormed out of the studio, my mind racing. I felt like I was in a bad dream that I couldn't wake up from. As I drove home, the world outside blurred into a haze. I could hardly think straight. I felt humiliated, angry, and utterly betrayed. My mind was a whirlwind of questions. How long had this been going on? Was it just physical, or was there something deeper? And what about Lily? My heart ached for her innocence, for the life we had built together. I got home and slammed the door behind me, my fists clenched in rage. I could hear Sarah calling my name, but I didn't want to face her. I couldn't bear to look at the woman I thought I knew. I needed to think, to plan my next move. I knew I had to confront this head on, but I also wanted to ensure that Claire faced the consequences of her actions. I sat on the couch, staring at the blank TV screen, my mind racing with thoughts of revenge. I had to expose her for what she had done. I couldn't let her get away with ruining my family. The next few days were a blur of anger and confusion. I couldn't shake the image of Sarah and Claire together, their laughter echoing in my mind like a haunting melody. I felt like a ghost in my own home, walking around in a daze while my heart thudded heavily in my chest. Sarah tried to reach out to me to explain herself, but I couldn't bear to hear her words. Each time she approached, I felt the rage bubbling beneath the surface, ready to explode. Lily remained blissfully unaware, practicing her ballet routines and preparing for her upcoming recital. I watched her with a heavy heart, torn between wanting to protect her and the desire to confront the truth. I couldn't let this betrayal fester. I had to act. I spent sleepless nights plotting my revenge, thinking of ways to ensure that Claire would pay for what she had done. My first step was to gather evidence. I needed something concrete, something that would not only expose Claire but also make sure she felt the weight of her actions. I decided to follow Sarah one evening after she claimed she was going to meet some friends for dinner. I had my suspicions that she would meet Claire instead, and I was determined to find out the truth. I parked my car a few blocks from the restaurant where Sarah said she would be. The sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the street, but all I felt was cold. I waited, my heart racing, as I watched the entrance of the restaurant. After about half an hour, I saw Sarah walk in, her head held high, a smile on her face that made my stomach churn. Minutes later, Claire arrived, looking as radiant as ever. They hugged tightly, and for a moment I felt a surge of jealousy that was almost overwhelming. I was watching my wife embrace another woman, one who had crossed the line. As they sat down, I felt a fire ignite within me. I was ready to take action. I pulled out my phone and began recording them discreetly from my car. I couldn't hear their conversation, but I could see the way they leaned toward each other, the way their eyes sparkled with a connection that was only meant for lovers. I felt sickened by the sight. This wasn't just a casual affair, this was something deeper, something that threatened to destroy everything I held dear. After about an hour, they left the restaurant, laughing and chatting as if nothing were wrong. I followed them, careful to keep my distance, my heart pounding in anticipation. They walked to Claire's car, and as they stood by the passenger door, I caught a glimpse of them sharing a kiss that shattered any lingering doubts I had about the nature of their relationship. That was it. I had the proof I needed. I returned home, my mind racing with a mixture of anger and determination. I transferred the footage to my computer and watched it over and over again, each replay fueling my fury. I had to think carefully about how to use this evidence to my advantage. I wanted to ruin Claire's reputation, to expose her to everyone in the ballet community. I wanted her to feel the same humiliation I felt. The next day, I decided to pay a visit to the ballet studio. I had no intention of confronting Sarah just yet. I wanted to focus on Claire. I walked into the studio, my heart racing with anticipation. The smell of sweat and the sound of classical music filled the air as I watched the young girls practice their routines. But my eyes were locked on Claire, who was busy instructing her students. I approached her, my heart pounding. She looked up and smiled, but her expression faltered when she saw the look on my face. "Mark, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice dripping with feigned innocence. "I think we need to talk," I said, my voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside me. I could see her panic rising as I gestured for her to step outside. She hesitated but eventually followed me, her eyes darting around as if searching for an escape. Once outside, I confronted her. "You think you can just come into my life and take my wife? You think there won't be consequences?" I asked, my voice low and dangerous. I could feel the tension hanging in the air, the weight of my words pressing down on us. Claire's face paled as she realized I had seen her with Sarah. "Mark, save it," interrupted, cutting her off. "I have proof of what you've done, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly who you are." I pulled out my phone and showed her the video, watching as her face contorted from shock to fear. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice trembling. I leaned closer, my voice a harsh whisper. "I want you to end this relationship. I want you to stay away from my family, and if you don't, I'll make sure that every parent at this studio knows what kind of person you are." The realization of her impending downfall washed over her. "You wouldn't," she stammered, but I could see the fear in her eyes. "I would," I replied, my voice firm. "You've crossed a line, Claire, and I won't let you get away with it." With that, I turned on my heel and walked away, my heart pounding with adrenaline. I had taken the first step in my plan, and it felt good. I knew I had to keep my emotions in check and stay focused on my goal. As I drove home, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and anger. I was no longer the victim. I was taking control of my life. I was ready for the next phase of my revenge. After my confrontation with Claire, I felt a surge of empowerment. I had taken a bold step, and for the first time since discovering the affair, I felt some control over the situation. But I knew this was just the beginning. I needed a plan that would not only ensure Claire stayed away from Sarah and Lily, but also make her pay for the pain she had caused our family. The following days were filled with strategizing. I had to be careful. I didn't want to tip Sarah off about what I was doing. I spent my evenings researching Claire's background in the ballet studio, looking for any cracks in her facade that I could exploit. I needed to find a way to expose her, not just to make her feel the sting of betrayal, but to dismantle her reputation in the community she thrived in. I started by reaching out to other parents at the ballet studio. I casually engaged in conversations, asking about their experiences with Claire. What I discovered was startling. While many parents praised her teaching abilities, there were whispers of discontent. Some parents felt she was unprofessional and had a tendency to favor certain students over others. I sensed an opportunity. I decided to organize a parents' meeting under the guise of discussing the upcoming recital. I sent out an email to all the parents, suggesting we gather to discuss not only the event but also any concerns regarding the studio and its instructors. As the day approached, I felt a familiar rush of adrenaline. This was my chance to plant the seeds of doubt about Claire in the minds of the other parents. On the evening of the meeting, I arrived early to set up the room. I could see the familiar faces of other parents filtering in, their expressions a mix of excitement and curiosity. I greeted them warmly, masking my true intentions behind a friendly smile. As we settled in, I introduced the agenda, highlighting the recital and then smoothly transitioning to the topic of the instructors. I think it's important that we discuss our children's experiences at the studio. I began, my voice steady. I know many of us appreciate Claire's teaching style, but I've heard some concerns from other parents about her approach. The room buzzed with murmurs. I could see the interest peaking, the parents leaning in closer to hear what I had to say. I continued, carefully planting doubts about Claire's professionalism, hinting at favoritism and unprofessional conduct without directly accusing her. I just think we should be aware of how our children are being treated and ensure that all students are given fair opportunities. As I spoke, I watched the reactions on their faces. A few parents nodded in agreement, while others exchanged glances, clearly considering my words. I felt a sense of satisfaction as I realized I was gaining traction. I had successfully turned the tide of opinion against Claire, and with every passing moment, I could feel her grip on the studio loosening. Once the meeting ended, I made sure to linger, engaging in casual conversations with the parents who seemed most receptive to my concerns. I shared anecdotes about my own experiences with Claire, subtly casting her in a negative light without revealing my personal vendetta. The seeds of doubt were planted, and I felt a rush of exhilaration at the thought of what would come next. The following week, I decided it was time to take my plan a step further. I wanted to catch Claire off guard and make sure she understood the consequences of her actions. I arranged to meet with the studio owner, a woman named Mrs. Hargrove, who had been running the ballet school for years. I needed to ensure she was aware of Claire's behavior and the potential fallout if it continued. I scheduled a meeting under the pretense of discussing the upcoming recital and how we could improve the experience for the students and parents. When I arrived at the studio, I felt a mix of nerves and determination. Mrs. Hargrove was a no-nonsense woman who valued the reputation of her studio above all else. I needed to tread carefully. As we sat in her office, I brought up the recital plans, discussing logistics and how we could enhance the event. Then I shifted the conversation towards Claire. Mrs. Hargrove, I've heard some concerns from parents regarding Claire's teaching methods. I think it's important we address this before it becomes a larger issue. Mrs. Hargrove's expression hardened slightly, but she nodded for me to continue. I recounted the whispers I had heard from other parents, emphasizing the need for fairness in the studio. I believe our children deserve the best, and if there are issues with how students are being treated, we need to address them before it affects the studio's reputation. As I spoke, I could see Mrs. Hargrove's demeanor change. She was considering my words, weighing the implications of what I was saying. I knew she took her business seriously, and the last thing she wanted was a scandal involving one of her instructors. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Mark," she said, her tone thoughtful. "I'll certainly look into it. I want to ensure that all our students feel valued and supported." I left her office feeling triumphant. I had successfully planted the seeds of doubt not just with the parents but also with the studio owner. I knew that if Claire's reputation was tarnished, it would make it much easier to confront her about the affair. As the days passed, I continued to gather information and build my case against Claire. I noticed changes in the studio dynamics. Parents began to question Claire's authority, and whispers of her unprofessionalism circulated. The tension was palpable and I could feel the momentum shifting in my favor, but I also knew I had to confront Sarah about her affair. It was time to reveal everything. I had to ensure she understood the full extent of her betrayal and the consequences that came with it. I steeled myself for the conversation, knowing it would be painful but necessary. That evening, I found Sarah sitting on the couch, her eyes glued to the television. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady but firm. She looked up, surprise flashing across her face. "About what?" "About Claire," I replied, my gaze unwavering. "And about you." The air in the room thickened with tension as I uttered Claire's name. Sarah's expression shifted from surprise to apprehension, and I could see the color drain from her face. She knew deep down that this conversation was inevitable. I took a moment to gather my thoughts, preparing for the emotional storm that was about to unfold. "Mark, please," she began, but I raised my hand to stop her. "No, Sarah, you do get to talk yet. I need you to listen," I said, my voice firm. "I know about the affair. I saw you with Claire. I heard what you said." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Her face paled further, and I could see the panic rising in her eyes. "Mark, I didn't mean for it to happen. It was a mistake," she stammered, her voice trembling. "A mistake?" I echoed, incredulous. "You call sleeping with our daughter's ballet instructor a mistake? You've shattered the foundation of our family. You've betrayed me in the worst way possible." My heart raced, a mix of anger and hurt surging through me. I felt the pain of betrayal like a physical wound, raw and exposed. "I never wanted to hurt you," she pleaded, tears welling in her eyes. "It just happened. I was confused, and Claire." She listened to me. I thought I could find comfort with her. "Comfort?" I spat, disbelief pouring from my lips. "You thought you could find comfort in the arms of someone who is supposed to be teaching our daughter. This isn't just about you and your feelings, Sarah. This affects Lily too. What kind of example are you setting for her?" The mention of our daughter seemed to hit her harder. She collapsed onto the couch, burying her face in her hands as sobs racked her body. "I'm so sorry, Mark. I never wanted to hurt you or Lily. It was a moment of weakness, and I regret it every single day." I felt a mix of anger and sympathy as I watched her break down. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to wrap my arms around her and tell her everything would be okay. But the other part of me was too consumed by betrayal. I couldn't shake the image of her with Claire, their laughter echoing in my mind. "Regret doesn't fix this, Sarah," I said, my voice softer but still firm. "You need to understand that this isn't just about your feelings. You've crossed a line and there will be consequences. I've already taken steps to ensure Claire faces them." Her head snapped up, confusion etched on her face. "What do you mean, steps? What have you done?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I was about to reveal. "I've spoken to the other parents and the studio owner. I've made sure they're aware of Claire's behavior and how it affects the children. I won't let her get away with this. She needs to be held accountable for what she's done." Sarah's expression shifted from confusion to horror. "You can't do that. Mark, you're ruining her career. Please, you have to stop." "Stop," I echoed, incredulity flooding my voice. "You want me to stop after what she's done?" "After what you've done? No, Sarah, you need to understand that I won't let this slide. You've destroyed my trust, and now I'm going to make sure she pays for her part in this." Mark, please, she cried, desperation in her voice. You don't understand, I was lost in Claire. She made me feel seen. I was trying to cope with my own insecurities. I never meant for it to go this far. I shook my head, my heart aching for the woman I had once loved so deeply. This isn't about what you were trying to cope with, Sarah. This is about the choices you made. You chose to betray me, and now you have to face the consequences of those choices. This isn't just about you anymore, it's about our family. Silence filled the room as her sobs quieted, and I could see the realization dawning on her. She had to understand that there was no going back from this. The trust was shattered and the damage was done. Do you even care what this will do to Lily? I asked, my voice low and steady. Do you think she won't feel the fallout of this? How do you think she'll react when she finds out her mother was unfaithful? Sarah looked down, shame washing over her features. I never wanted her to know. I thought I could keep it hidden. I thought it was just a phase, she whispered, her voice barely audible. But it's not just a phase, is it? I pressed, anger bubbling up again. This is a reality we have to face. You have to own up to your mistakes, and so does Claire. You both have to face the consequences of your actions. I felt a sense of finality in my words. The path I had chosen was set, and there was no turning back. I had made my intentions clear, and now it was time for Sarah to confront the reality of what she had done. I don't want to lose you, Mark, she said, her voice breaking. I'm so sorry. I'll do anything to make it right. Anything, I echoed, skepticism lacing my voice. What does that even mean? Can you promise me this won't happen again? Can you promise me that you won't seek comfort in someone else? Because right now, your actions say otherwise. I'll go to counseling. I'll do whatever it takes to prove to you that I can change, she pleaded, her eyes searching mine for hope. I sighed, feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. We'll see, I replied, my voice lacking conviction. But right now, you need to understand that I won't tolerate this. Not from you, not from her. As I walked away, I felt a mix of anger and sadness. I had confronted Sarah, but I also realized that the road ahead would be filled with challenges. Trust had been shattered, and while I was determined to seek revenge on Claire, I also had to navigate the complicated emotions tied to my marriage. I had taken the first step in addressing the affair, but the battle was far from over. I needed to ensure that Claire's actions had consequences, and I would stop at nothing to make that happen. The days that followed my confrontation with Sarah were fraught with tension. I felt like I was walking on eggshells in my own home, every conversation tinged with the bitterness of betrayal. Sarah was trying hard to show her remorse, attending therapy sessions and making promises she wasn't sure she could keep. But no amount of pleading or therapy could erase the image of her with Claire, nor could it restore the trust that had been so brutally shattered. I kept my focus on my plan to confront Claire and ensure she faced the consequences of her actions. I had gathered enough evidence and support from other parents to make a significant impact, and I wasn't about to back down. My resolve was stronger than ever, fueled by anger and a sense of justice. One evening, I received a call from Mrs. Hargrove, the studio owner. She wanted to meet with me to discuss the concerns I had raised about Claire. My heart raced as I prepared for the conversation, knowing this would be a pivotal moment in my quest for revenge. I felt a sense of anticipation mixed with dread as I walked into the studio, the familiar scent of sweat and wood filling the air. Mrs. Hargrove was waiting for me in her office, her expression serious. Thank you for coming, Mark. I've been reviewing the concerns you brought to my attention, and I think it's important we address this matter before it escalates further. I nodded, feeling a mix of nervousness and determination. Thank you for taking this seriously. I believe it's crucial for the well-being of the students and the integrity of the studio. Mrs. Hargrove leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. I've spoken with several parents, and I've heard some troubling things about Claire's behavior. It seems there may be more going on than just what you've mentioned. I appreciate you bringing this to light. I felt a thrill of satisfaction at her acknowledgement. I have evidence of her unprofessional conduct, and I believe it's important for you to see it. Parents need to be aware of who is teaching their children, I said, my voice steady. She gestured for me to proceed, and I pulled out my phone, ready to show her the recordings I had gathered. I played the video of Sarah and Claire, the kiss that had shattered my world, the intimate moments that revealed the truth of their relationship. As the footage played, I watched Mrs. Hargrove's expression shift from curiosity to shock. "I can't believe this," she whispered, her eyes wide. "This is serious. I had no idea it had gone this far. It's not just about the affair, Mrs. Hargrove. It's about the impact this has on the students and the reputation of the studio. If parents find out that one of their instructors is engaging in inappropriate relationships with students' parents, it could ruin everything." I explained, the weight of my words hanging heavily in the air. She nodded, her brow furrowing in concern. "You're right. This is unacceptable. I'll need to take immediate action. Thank you for bringing this to my attention." I felt a surge of triumph as I realized my plan was coming to fruition. Mrs. Hargrove promised to address the situation with Claire and handle it discreetly, but I knew I had to make sure it had the impact I wanted. I needed Claire to feel the full weight of her actions, and I wasn't going to let her escape unscathed. The next day, I decided to pay another visit to the studio. I wanted to confront Claire directly, to see the fear in her eyes as she realized the consequences were closing in on her. As I walked through the familiar halls, the sound of ballet shoes tapping against the floor echoed around me. I could see the little girls practicing their routines, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing just outside their classroom. When I found Claire in her office, I didn't waste any time. "We need to talk," I said, my voice low and controlled. She looked up, her expression shifting from surprise to apprehension. "Mark, what are you doing here?" "I'm here to let you know that your time is running out. Mrs. Hargrove is aware of what you've done, and she's taking action. You're going to face the consequences of your actions, and I won't let you damage my family any further." Claire's face paled, and I could see the panic rising within her. "You can't do this. I didn't mean for it to happen. It was just a mistake." "A mistake?" I echoed, my voice dripping with disdain. "You think you can just waltz into our lives and take what's mine? You've shattered my family, Claire, and now you're going to pay for it." "I'll do anything to make it right, Mark," she pleaded, desperation lacing her voice. "Please don't do this." I never wanted to hurt anyone, but I wasn't interested in her excuses. I wanted her to understand the gravity of her actions. "You need to think about the lives you've affected. This isn't just about you and Sarah anymore. It's about my daughter, and I won't let you ruin her childhood." "I'll leave the studio, I promise," Claire said, her voice trembling. "Just please don't take this further." I stared at her, my heart racing. I could see the fear in her eyes, and for a moment I felt a flicker of sympathy. But I quickly pushed it aside. "You think leaving will fix this? You've already done enough damage. You need to be held accountable for what you've done." With that, I turned and walked out of her office, a sense of satisfaction washing over me. I had confronted her, and I could feel the power shifting. She was losing control, and I was just beginning to take mine back. As I drove home, I felt a mix of triumph and uncertainty. I had set the wheels in motion for Claire's downfall, but I knew the battle was far from over. Sarah was still in the picture, and I had to figure out how to navigate this new reality. The next step was to make sure that Claire's actions were made public. I couldn't allow her to simply walk away from this without facing the consequences. I needed to ensure that every parent at the studio knew exactly who they were dealing with. As the days passed, the tension in my home continued to grow. Sarah was trying her best to mend our relationship, but I was still consumed by the betrayal. I had made significant strides in my plan against Claire, but I needed to finalize my approach. I felt an urgency to ensure that Claire faced the repercussions of her actions and that the truth was brought to light. After my confrontation with Claire, I decided to reach out to the parents at the studio one last time. I crafted an email that would inform them of the situation without revealing too many details. I wanted to create a sense of urgency and ensure that they understood the risk their children faced under Claire's instruction. I knew that if I could sway the parents, I could force the studio into action. Subject: Important update regarding ballet instruction. Dear parents, I hope this message finds you well. I am writing to address some concerns that have been brought to my attention regarding the environment at our ballet studio. I believe it's crucial for us to ensure that our children are in a safe and supportive setting. In light of recent events, I urge all parents to be vigilant and to have open conversations with your children about their experiences at the studio. It's important we work together to ensure that every child feels valued and respected. If you have any concerns or have noticed any behaviors that you feel may be inappropriate, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Our children deserve the best, and we must hold our instructors accountable. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Sincerely, Mark. As I hit send, I felt a rush of adrenaline. This was it, the moment I had been working toward. I could only imagine how the parents would react. I knew that my message would stir up concern and lead to discussions among the parents, creating a ripple effect that would inevitably reach Claire and Mrs. Hargrove. Within hours, my phone began to buzz with responses from concerned parents. They expressed their gratitude for my message and shared their own experiences with Claire. Some mentioned feeling uncomfortable with her teaching style, while others noted strange interactions that had left them uneasy. I felt a sense of satisfaction knowing that I had successfully rallied the parents against Claire. The following week, the studio held a meeting to address the concerns raised by the parents. I attended, knowing this would be the moment of reckoning for Claire. As I walked into the room, I could see the tension on Mrs. Hargrove's face. She was clearly aware of the storm brewing around Claire, and I could sense her unease. As the meeting began, Mrs. Hargrove addressed the parents, acknowledging the concerns that had been raised. I want to assure you all that we take these matters very seriously. The safety and well-being of our students is our top priority, she stated firmly. I could see Claire sitting at the back, her face pale, the weight of the situation pressing down on her. After Mrs. Hargrove spoke, she opened the floor for discussion. I waited patiently, my heart pounding as parents began to voice their concerns. The atmosphere was charged with anxiety, and I could feel the tide turning against Claire. One by one, parents shared their experiences, echoing the sentiments I had expressed in my email. Finally, I stood up, my heart racing. I believe it's important we hold our instructors accountable for their actions, especially when it comes to our children's safety. I have evidence that shows Claire has crossed professional boundaries, and I think it's vital for everyone here to be aware of it. Gasps filled the room, and all eyes turned toward Claire. I could see her panic rising as I pulled out my phone and played the video that had become the cornerstone of my evidence. The room fell silent as the footage played, revealing the intimate moments between Sarah and Claire. When the video ended, the room erupted in whispers. The shock on parents' faces was palpable, and I could feel the weight of the truth settling in. Mrs. Hargrove's expression shifted from shock to determination as she stood up, addressing the crowd. I will not tolerate this behavior in my studio. Claire, you need to understand the seriousness of your actions. This is not just a personal matter, it affects the entire community. I will be taking immediate steps to address this situation. Claire's face was a mix of anger and despair. You can't do this. I never meant to hurt anyone. It was a mistake, she shouted, desperation lacing her voice. But the parents were no longer receptive to her pleas. They had seen the evidence, and the trust they had placed in her was shattered. I felt a sense of satisfaction as I watched the parents rally together, united in their desire to protect their children from Claire's influence. As the meeting concluded, Mrs. Hargrove announced that Claire would be suspended pending an investigation. It was a small victory, but it was just the beginning. I knew that I had successfully exposed Claire, and now it was time for her to face the consequences of her actions. When I returned home that evening, I felt a mix of relief and lingering anger. I had taken significant steps to ensure that Claire would no longer be a threat to my family, but I still had to navigate my relationship with Sarah. She had expressed her desire to make things right, but I knew it would take time to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. Over the next few weeks, I focused on Lily, ensuring that she felt safe and supported. I had meaningful conversations with her about trust, respect, and the importance of making good choices. I wanted to protect her innocence while also preparing her for the complexities of the world. As for Sarah, we began attending couples therapy together. It was a long and challenging road, filled with difficult conversations and raw emotions. but I could see that she was genuinely trying to make amends, and I appreciated her efforts. It was a slow process, but I was willing to give it a chance. In the end, I realized that while Claire's actions had shattered our lives, they had also forced me to confront my own vulnerabilities and the fragility of trust. I had sought revenge, but what I truly wanted was healing for myself, for Sarah, and for Lily. As time passed, the storm began to subside. I had taken control of my life, and while the scars of betrayal would always remain, I knew that I could rebuild. I had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, ready to embrace whatever the future held. The journey was far from over, but I felt a sense of hope. I had fought for my family, and now it was time to focus on healing and moving forward together.